Howdy folks, you have tuned in to another Wumu transmission. Now, good news for all, today we have a double header. Yay, because I've been really keeping up with them all. Anyway, so to kick things off, and by the way, before I move on, I'd just like to say thank you to all the new subscribers. I've moved from 30 to 750 subscribers in 7 days. Now, that is the equivalent of 2,500% increase-ish. So if I was to keep this up, compounded over a month, we'd be equal with Mr. Beast. That is 260 million subscribers. I kid, but in all actuality, I really appreciate your following, and I sincerely hope you enjoy. Let's keep it moving. All right, so to kick off the doubleheader, we're going to be talking about the Philosopher's Stone. Alchemical thinking of those during the Middle Ages and the Renaissance and throughout all human antiquity, understanding what immortality actually is, and just some cool fun little tidbits, right? This is how to transmute both your spiritual lead to gold and potentially a free money hack. Interesting. Stay tuned. So what is it exactly? So like I said, as above, so below, as within, so without. So what exists metaphysically must exist physically. At least that's the idea. So metaphysically, in a spiritual sense, this is the rising of the phoenix of the human spirit. This is the enlightenment. Okay, this is the gnosis. It is putting the work in yourself, and we'll get on to what that work kind of is. Hang on, let me just sort out Nobbit. Sorry, Nobby was just having a little coughing fit. Back to it. So metaphysically, this is the transmutation of lead to gold is the enlightenment. That is the Philosopher's Stone. That is the Holy Grail. It's all one and the same thing. We've explained what the Holy Grail is. That is the central point within a torsional hyperboloid, which is the inner vortice of a torus. But I'm not going to go sidetrack myself there. If you're interested in that, go look at that video. Free energy, wormholes, and Ezekiel's will. Now, physically, what is the Philosopher's Stone? Well, look, and I'm just sharing ideas. And I've done my research, and I received certain information from whoever, whatever, which will be next episode, by the way. But physically, it is a thing. Now, many people have famously died attempting this and trying to consume it. Isaac Newton, one of many, have died from mercury poisoning in the attempt to figure this out. Ironically, and while it is a tragedy, there is some funniness to it, a Luxmaxer, who his friends thought had attained high spiritual attainment, or high spiritual conscious levels, he was shooting himself up with gold. Now, is that high-level consciousness? I'm not so sure. Is being a Luxmaxer, that is being worried about how other people perceive you, high-level consciousness? I personally don't think so. But hey, that's just my opinion. Believe what you'd like to believe. So, the idea of creating the Philosopher's Stone is a red powder. It's a red product that is basically the perfected combination of mercury and sulfur with ammonia, okay, with a salt. So I'll explain in a second the alchemical pyramid and kind of the idea behind this, the thinking behind this, okay? So the Pythagorean pyramid of alchemy, right? So understanding the elements, okay? And there is a slide after this explaining that all is one, but essentially down the bottom here, we have the four elements, and so metaphysically this would be considered the four cardinal points. So fire, water, earth, and water. Fire, earth, water, spirit, air. Okay? So in relation to the cardinal points, north, south, east, and west, so the vertical line, the north to south, this is the masculine. So the north represents fire. The south, and nous, right? The south represents spirit, that is air. And then on the horizontal plane, you have the feminine. Okay, so west, water. East, earth. Simple enough, right? So the level above this, we have sulfur, mercury, and salt. So all those 4 elements are made of those 3 elements. Then above that, we have the lunar and the solar, the marriage of the masculine and the feminine, right? The metaphysical hermaphrodite. And I'll touch on this next episode. And then above that, we have the all is one. So it all filters down, okay? So these are the elemental, this is the elemental view that the alchemists had. Okay? So how did these people actually think? Well, science, material reductionist science currently, works on the premise of essentially trying to defeat nature. Whereas these alchemists wanted to work like nature through observation. So they would look, okay? Now, this will be a bit of a mind bend, okay? So but I'm going to give you an example. So we get told that the molten core of the earth is iron, right? Well, how do they know that? I'm not saying that's demonstrably false. I don't know that. That's the point though. But that is the idea. We're like, okay, we get told the core of the earth is iron. Great. Now, where do you find mercury and sulfur? Where do you mine it from? From volcanoes. So if you're thinking of the most direct conduit from the molten center of the earth to the surface, well, you'd probably go check near a volcano, right? Lava around this. This is where you find cinnabar, cinnabar being the combination of sulfur and mercury and sulfur, okay? So the idea is, and I'll touch on this in a slide or two, that all elements, all matter is basically a different purity or a different adaptation of the one thing, okay? And so where does gold come from? How does it actually get created? How does lead, how does any metal or anything? So the idea is mercury, quicksilver, is the perfect metal, okay? And why would it be the perfect metal? Well, it is the most metallic, the most shiny, quicksilver, liquid silver, and it is also the most dense. And so to define metal, if you go through the list of the noble metals, the next most dense, the most noble metal, gold, it is the most dense and the most metallic. Below that, you have silver, so on and so forth through the noble metals. There's 7 noble metals in an octave, okay? And I'll get to that. Keep that in mind. And so sulfur also, so they thought the center of the earth was essentially mercury and sulfur. And as this molten core rises to the surface, depending on its path and the impurities it takes on, will determine the outcome of what that metal is when it reaches the surface. This is just how they thought, all right? And so if you go through some super gnarly, bombastic way and you take on a lot of sulfur, you'll be a less pure metal, say lead, the 7th of the noble metals. But if you just have a direct line up there, well, you get gold, or mercury, even better. That's why it's near the volcano, right? So this is how they thought. They observed nature. Okay, well, how is nature creating these things? And they come up with their own ideas and quips as to how that actually arrived. And this actually makes a bit of sense. I'm not saying it's true, but I'm just explaining to you the methodology, the thinking behind what they were actually doing, okay? Scientific precedent. Now, you might say, oh, you can't change one thing into another thing. Well, yeah, you can. Just as of last year, talk about good timing, a nuclear fusion startup, Marathon Fusion, as you can see here on the left, literally bombed the shit out of some mercury and made some gold out of it. Okay. Now, this took a lot of energy. This is the material reductionist scientism view of trying to defeat nature. Well, what if you could achieve the same thing by working like nature? Okay, that's the idea. All is the one verse. So, like I said, if all things just come from the one, which of these periodic tables, which way of looking at what matter is, seems more correct or more true? Down the bottom here, you have the classic Madison periodic table, which we all know and love. And on the right here, you have Walter Russell's. Now, this is split into 2 octaves, or octaves, right? Because the universe is one verse. You know, like the Pythagorean Symphony of the Spheres, it's understanding that it is one song, it is sound that manifests into matter, okay? Now, you may be familiar with this from Terrence Howard's Joe Rogan podcast a couple of years ago. Now, he was heavily ridiculed for this. I think unfairly, personally. But irrespective of whether all of what he said is true, or whether you agree with all of it, it's silly to throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. Now, Einstein, who is kind of one of the kings of the material reductionist scientism philosophy, he famously said on his deathbed, "I wish I'd paid more attention to Walter Russell's work," which you have here on the right. Okay, so again, just food for thought. Pyramidal sites. Okay, so this is the origin of alchemy. The word alchemy, and then later chemistry, what we have today, stems from ancient Egypt, which went by the name Chem. Okay, now these were fabled alchemists. Okay, you'll see here I've got 3 pyramidal sites, all clearly made by the same people. Whether they were human, alien, whatever, that doesn't matter. Next episode we'll touch on that. But outside of their staggering engineering behind it, and I thought I'd throw this in there for a bit of a fun fact, all 3 of them are exactly aligned to the Orion belt, the 3-star constellation of Orion, and then even more meta, so this is fractal geometry, holofractal universe, because the people understood this building them. If you draw a line between each 3 of these pyramidal sites, you get another Orion star. I mean, these guys were next level, dude. These are the same people. This doesn't happen just by coincidence. Coincidence doesn't exist. Nobby! 1 second. Norbit! Is that still going? Maybe not. Norbit! This one. Come on. I'm using you, Marty. Okay. We're back. So why am I showing you this? Well, across all 3 sites, they have found evidence of mercury usage. Famously, the Chinese one, where the terracotta army was built. I forgot the emperor's name, but he was entombed within a microcosm of the universe with liquid mercury rivers around him. Okay, it was meant to be a fractal of Earth or the universe or whatever. And in Egypt, they found in temple sites mercury usage, pools of mercury. And in Teotihuacan, under the Great Pyramid there, the Temple of Quetzalcoatl, the flying serpent, which we explored in episode 1 of the Metaphysics Kook playlist, these guys were using mercury and sulfur. There's evidence of sulfuric acid and sulfur usage in Egypt. If you look at Land of Chem, another great YouTube assets channel, he goes into great detail about this. So these were alchemical plants. These were multi-usage sites. And the only logical conclusion is they had a usage for gold, named monoatomic gold, food of the gods, which the Egyptians would eat, and gold, directly corresponding to the sun, metaphysically helped you attain a level of consciousness of the sun, or bring in information and higher level consciousness. Right? But it's, in fact, irony. I was just mentioning that a YouTuber or Luxmaxer just died shooting himself up with gold. I eat gold. I'll grab it quickly. So this right here is monoatomic gold. Okay, now this is not nanoparticle gold to be shot up. This is a specifically alchemized transmutation of gold into a bioavailable salty ceramic, right? You don't shoot it up. You lick your finger, little dab, and that's all you're taking. Right? That's how you consume it. Shout out to Blue Emerald Alchemy, by the way, for some pretty fire gear. I've got a lot of their products. Hugely recommend checking them out if you're into that sort of thing. But anyway, so this is the true usage of monoatomic gold. I mean, and there's many other use forms for it, I'm sure, that I don't know yet. But this is why, I mean, you've got to wonder, why is gold revered in the way it is? Okay, the other thing with monoatomic gold is it is a theorized superconductor. Okay, so that can affect space-time itself and gravity and mass, and it has all these amazing properties to it. So that is why we have this fascination of gold, because it comes from somewhere, okay? All three of these sites, far more advanced people than we are, were doing this. So is there something to it? I don't know. I mean, I think so. I believe so. That's why I'm doing this. Do I know so? No. But is it helping me? Yes. So, food for thought, okay? Now, colours of alchemy. So, speaking of chem, Egypt, where alchemy was birthed and then later became chemistry, what colours on the flag do you find on Egypt? Red, black, and white. So too a lot of the Persian, well, current Arabic, Middle Eastern flags, you find red, white, and black. The Negredo, the Albedo, you also have the Citrinatus, the yellowing, but then the Rubedo. So black, white, and red. Okay. Now what these represent, alchemically speaking, is the blackening, the putrefaction, the albedo, the whitening, the cleansing, the Citrinatus, the dawning of solar wisdom. So gold represents the sun, the direct correlation between the 7 ruling planets and the 7 noble metals. Gold equals sun, right? Each noble metal has a corresponding ruling planet. Same way we have 7 days of the week. Silver is the moon. And then you have the rubedo. This is the rising, often symbolized by a lion or the rising of the phoenix, right? So, and there is specific steps to take in transmuting any botanical substance, the Spigaric method, or there's other various means of achieving this, but it is important that the gold, if you choose to eat it, goes through a very specific process before you start doing silly stuff because you heard it on the internet. So don't listen to me, do your own research, okay? A little slide to finish off. Okay, I like the idea of leaving some quotes with you. So, Socrates and Plato, two of the greatest thinkers of all time, I think we can all agree with that. Socrates: great minds talk of ideas, average minds talk of events, weak minds speak of people. Food for thought. Plato: I know nothing. Right? So the more you know you don't know, and being comfortable in not knowing is actually how you get to know more. Such is the paradox of life. So we shall leave that one there, and I'll see you in a minute for the next one. Woo-moo. Woo-way. P.S. Just very quickly, I actually have a recipe for the transmutation of lead to gold and the philosopher's stone. Literally, a proper recipe with very specific steps. Okay? Now, do I know this will work? No. But if there are any chemists or anyone with a safe working environment to attempt this experiment, and anyone interested in these ideas, hit me up. I'm Sydney based, so if anyone has access to, I mean, you don't need very advanced equipment, I can send you the recipe. You can have a look at it. You can dispute it. You can say no and not want to do it. That's fine. But if you're willing to give it a crack, you don't know until you know. You know, you can only know through experience. So at least we could knock that nail on the head, knowing that it is possible in nature. It's already been done. So let me know. We can work like nature, not against nature. and see if we can figure out the ultimate free money hack. Fun. Easy. Wumu, Ruwe.